If you don't know who you're talking to, how do you know what to say? I'm Rebecca Richardson, and I've been a lender for over 20 years. One of the biggest things that has made a difference in my marketing is really understanding who my client avatar is. And I wanted to share with you what my process is to help you make your marketing better to be able to attract your ideal client. So a lot of times when we think about the content that we're making or the marketing that we're putting out, we're thinking we want the broadest appeal. We want to hit the biggest numbers when it comes to the videos that are watched or likes or engagement or things like that. And there is a time and a place where it does make sense to have a general message to reach out to everybody. But if you're really trying to use video and digital marketing to reach a specific type of client and attract the business that you want, one of the things that's most important is to really figure out your client avatar. And by my definition, a client avatar describes your ideal client. So there are 5 questions that I recommend going through to really be able to come up with a profile for your client and be able to have them in mind, either specifically when you're generating content and you're talking to them. You might be using a dog whistle to call them out and say, hey, if you're a veteran, or hey, if you're a first-time home buyer, or it might be something that's a little bit more subtle and it's just something that you're keeping in mind to make sure that the message that you're delivering is as if they were on the other side of the camera and you were talking to them specifically. One of the first questions that I want you to ask yourself is simply, who is your ideal client? So if you think back to a recent transaction or past transactions that felt effortless, and it felt like by the end of it that y'all were best friends and you're going to exchange Christmas cards, and honestly it was just an easy process. It felt like it was more of a friendship or just a conversation than work. And what I would suggest that you do, or what I have done that has worked for me, is to really kind of write that out from the standpoint of who they were, what was special about the transaction, maybe any kind of memorable things that we talked about. I can think about, I had a client that was refinancing. Her financial advisor had referred her over. And of course, we were having the conversation and talking about all the numbers and the figures and all of the regular things. And by the end of it, she had said, do you think when this is all over, do you think we could hang out? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Because it's wonderful to have those exchanges where it just feels natural. And she's become one of my best friends. So when you think about that, maybe think about, who that specific person was and have them in mind when we're going through some of the other questions. The next thing that I want you to think of is, what does their daily life look like? And for example, one of my client avatars are veterans. So as a former Army wife, I know what military families go through. So I understand all the subtleties from the standpoint of, you're looking to get settled as quickly as possible and kind of put down those roots, even though, it might only last as much as 3 years, sometimes even less. So that need to kind of, that you feel like you're under the gun, that you are on time pressure or on the clock to get settled, find somewhere, put down roots, and feel stable as quickly as possible. Another one of my client avatars are clients who are going through separation or divorce. And so I know that for those clients, that it's more than just the numbers and the facts and the figures and all of those kind of things. There is the emotional aspect that they want to, again, feel settled, have been through most often what's a very emotionally draining and sometimes financially draining experience and a major life transition. So when it comes to buying their house or completing a refinance to get their ex off of title, there's already kind of this heightened anxiousness and there's this heightened anxiety that they have that I think sometimes just even being able to acknowledge of, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I've been in your shoes, and this is something that you don't have to explain every little bit to me, right? And being able to kind of speak to that and give grace to where somebody may be based off of what experience they're going through. So their daily life might look like, from the standpoint of not a lot of time, really needing to, have as digital of an experience as possible. So a lot of text, a lot of emails. Maybe that looks like using Loom to walk through an estimate, because hopping on the phone for 10 to 15 minutes might not be in their schedule. So it's about being aware and being cognizant of what their daily life looks like. So we on the surface service side can make sure that we're making the process as easy as possible and give them kind of those warm fuzzies to make them feel positive about the experience. The third question when you're building out your client avatar is to think about what are their goals. Because if, let's say, you have a move-up buyer, right? So they've bought their first home before, they've gone through that experience, but maybe they haven't bought and sold at the same time. So understanding what their goals are from the standpoint of, is it most important that they have as easy of a transition as possible? Well, then some of that messaging or some of that marketing might look like talking about how to qualify and purchase non-contingent, so they don't have to sell before they can buy, and being able to, have that easy transition and go ahead and move into the new home and then stage or, have the previous home empty, and showings can be done at any time. Maybe that's very important to them. Maybe it's about, for an investor, understanding that they have a really great accountant and they don't show as much income as, probably is coming in because they're taking, allowable deductions. And so going through a traditional route for, say, a conventional loan won't be a fit, but they're wanting to build up their portfolio quickly. Well, in that case, we're talking about possibly DSCR loans and highlighting the ease of using a DSCR loan based off of the cash flow for the property versus, having to go the traditional route in tax returns. Also, a lot of times, in the mortgage space and the real estate space, we talk about building equity, building wealth, all of these wonderful things that real estate can do for us and does do for us. But if you think about your first-time home buyer who perhaps really their main goal is to have the stability. They're tired of rents going up on them and constantly having to reconfigure their budget to accommodate, whatever's going on with their rent and whatever decision the landlord. They're tired of going over their budget and having to redo it to accommodate whatever changes their, landlord makes, and not really feeling in control. So perhaps their biggest goal is just simply having a stable payment that fits within their budget. And one of those loftier goals of building up equity or making extra payments to the, to the principal or things like that might not fit into their picture right now. That will hopefully naturally happen over time, but perhaps their biggest goal is minimizing their out-of-pocket and stabilizing their house payment. So when you think about your ideal client, you think about your client avatar, getting down into the nitty-gritty of what their daily life looks like and what their goals are helps a lot from the standpoint of kind of framing whatever messaging you're talking, when you're thinking about how to frame your messaging, because you're able to speak directly to them. And the power of having avatar focused content is it cuts through the noise. It's not meant for everybody. And so the views on videos or the engagement on posts that are that specific might be lower. Typically, the conversion is higher because someone understands you're speaking to me. I don't have to explain everything to you of what's going on in my life. I don't even know everything that's in front of me, right? Because if kind of part of our magic is solving problems that they never even know about, it gives them that peace of mind and it gives them that comfort that makes them feel comfortable in reaching out. The fourth question to ask is, what are their challenges? And just like I said, part of our kind of secret of excellent service is anticipating what could happen and solving those problems before we run into it. That's where the challenges come in. So it could be for someone who maybe can afford the payment. It's a first-time home buyer and their DTI is fine, but maybe the challenge is the down payment. Well, that's when we're talking about things like down payment assistance, or we're talking about gifts from family and how that works. So understanding what challenges or what obstacles they perceive are getting in the way goes a long way. It might be, again, if we're talking about buyers who are going through separation or divorce, the challenge could be, hey, I understand that you want to move on with your life, but you don't have a separation agreement yet. You don't have, the division of assets, and we don't have that definition around, who is owning this debt? Where is the down payment coming from? Are these assets split? Is there any kind of child support that is being paid or perhaps that is being owed? And understanding that those complexities will come into play regardless, and being able to get ahead of them and explain to a client, hey, you might not even know that you have this challenge. But I want you to understand that I can see further down the road because of my experience, because of my knowledge, and I'm here to help us avoid those challenges or those obstacles becoming full roadblocks that prevent you from getting what you want. And then the last question is, what are they scared of? Because a lot of times this isn't going to be the stuff that they say to you. It's not going to be the challenges, hey, I don't have enough for a down payment. Typically, when you're thinking about the things that they're scared of, it is more emotion based. So it comes from the standpoint of what if I buy a house and things start breaking? I'm not going to have a landlord anymore that I can call and say, I need you to come and, fix the HVAC or things like that. That's where anticipating some of those fears and talking about things like you can have a home warranty, or, the need to have an emergency fund, and maybe the reason why maybe it's not best to put 5% down. Maybe you can put 3% down or 3.5% to give yourself that buffer. And it speaks to those fears, or it speaks to that fear that someone might have, that gives them permission for kind of that, that anxiety to decrease a little bit, so they feel more positive about moving forward. Perhaps as an example, for an investor, the fear might be, the rates are too high, or that this loan type, is going to cap how many homes I can have or how many I can add into my portfolio. So when you really go deep into developing a client avatar, it gives you the chance to, walk a mile in their shoes and speak to what's going on in their head versus just necessarily what they're saying to you. So as you're building out your avatars, I typically recommend that you have 2 to 3. A good strategy for one of the avatars is to, speak to who you used to be. There's a great quote that says, we're most equipped to help the person that we used to be. And the reason for that is because you are able to, turn that immediately into storytelling. What was it like for you to buy your first home? What was it like going through separation and divorce and worrying if you can keep your home? Or maybe, not being a first-time home buyer, but being a first-time investor, and being able to really personalize, which shows the empathy that you have for their scenario, because you've been in their shoes, you know what they're going through, and not only do you understand their problem, or maybe what their obstacles are, but you can empathize with it. And although what we do is very left brain and very logical, people still want to understand that you care. The second avatar that's good to develop is what's going on in the market. So for example, when it's not really a buyer's market, it might be a little bit more difficult to attract the clients who need the down payment assistance, or perhaps FHA loans, because sellers just aren't interested in really entertaining those. It's still good to educate clients, but if you kind of put all your eggs in that basket, you're picking a harder path, through the market. So it's important to speak to the buyers and the clients that are active now. So for example, maybe, there's not as much inventory, or, there's not as much buyer activity, but people have a ton of equity. So then that's talking about either HELOCs, or maybe that's talking about cash out refinances, overcoming some of those, those fears of maybe, not having that 3% rate anymore, but showing the overall picture of consolidating debt and how that actually gives them better cash flow that they can use in their favor to still continue to build equity and actually get ahead on their budget. And then the third one, I always recommend that it's something that you just like to do that's a little bit more of a niche, or it's something that's more complex that maybe not everybody likes to do. Perhaps it's non-warrantable condos, or maybe it's rehab loans, construction lending, VA loans, or particularly VA manual. All of those kind of things aren't necessarily your everyday vanilla, easy peasy type of loan. And so lenders shy away from them or don't do them well. And if that's something that you like, that complexity, and it fits for your brain, kind of feels like solving the Rubik's Cube, speak to that, because there are people that are out there that are looking for that kind of assistance. And when you're specific about who you can help, then it's a no-brainer for them to reach out to you. Hope this has been helpful, and I'm excited to hear from you. If you'd like to reach out, let me know, who your clients are or who your client avatars are. I always love talking about this. And please be sure to follow for more content like this, and I'll see you next time.